Let's talk about the purpose of the Android manifest file. Well, think of it simply as a summary. It goes through and sort of summarizes the important thing about your app, important things about your app. For example, what permissions it requires, what API level is needed for the app, services, activities, what hardware software is needed by your app, those types of things. You also need to define what screens, content providers, services, etc. are needed by your app. By default, your app cannot access any of these things, and the Android manifest file really sort of in one place summarizes what your app needs, and this is especially useful when you go to get your app installed by someone on their computer, on their Android device. It'll pop up and sort of say, this is the list of requirements. So I'm going to go into Google Play shortly, into the Play Store, and show you an example of it coming up saying what the requirements are, but we're also going to look at a real file. So let's go look at the real life example of an Android manifest file from one of the apps that we created, and from there we'll also look at how that looks in the App Store, so you can sort of understand that a little bit more. Okay, so let's start Eclipse again. And we're just going to go into an app that we've already created, and just to check out the Android manifest file, hopefully to make so this makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so we're going to go into our app, and down here this is the Android manifest file. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm just going to maximize that. We're going to look at the textual version, but we can also come over here incidentally and look at the graphical version. We're going to come back and talk about some of those in a minute, but sometimes it's easy to look at it in this mode. So first things first, you'll see some common information here. For example, the package. Recall in previous videos we've talked about what the package is. That's where the package, Eclipse updates this automatically and puts that in there, but it needs to be in there. The package does need to be in the Android manifest file. The version code and the version name are both used when you're uploading to the various Android app stores. One version, the name is shown on the screen. So if I go back to Google Play, do a search for one of my games. Okay, now we'll just go to the Google Android store. Okay, so if we scroll down a little bit further, we can see here the current version number is 2.10. So that equates to the version name. So you can assign that to be whatever you like, but that's what's going to show on the screen there. And this requires Android 2.33 and up. Well, 2.33 equates to a particular minimum SDK level, and that's defined in here. So again, whatever you put here as your minimum, because at the moment in our test file, we've got the minimum version being Jelly Bean, if you recall, which is a much higher version than 2.33, and our target version, of course, is the latest Android Lollipop. Obviously, because this is an older game, we've gone back to an older version, as you can see here. But I just want to equate how that sort of comes back to the Android manifest file. The other thing I want to talk about, which we can only see one of them here, Android Permission Internet. These are the user permissions. And if you've worked through the top 10 downloader already, you'll probably be aware of that. You would have seen me set this up. But that equates in the game that we download to this View Permissions section. Now you can see this version here, you can access in-app purchases, device ID and call information, full network access, and view network connections. They are the permissions that were defined in the Android manifest file when we uploaded this game. So you can see that when a user goes to install this game, all these permissions will come up, and they can decide whether they actually want to access those, to download the game to allow it to work. And if you don't define these permissions, as you saw in the test that I did, when I tried to run the app without having internet permission, the game wouldn't work. It literally, the app wouldn't work. It couldn't actually access the internet. So again, this is where we define permissions and those types of things. Whether you want to give access to allow the app to access the phone contacts, for example, the internet, as you can see in this example, but can also specify hardware, whether the app is allowed to use the camera. Well, really what you're doing is you're saying, my app does use the camera. if that makes sense. That's really what you're saying there. So you're making it clear in this file, this Android manifest file, what elements of the of the Android device your app is going to use. So we've talked about the version name, version code. This is a unique number. Every time you upload a new APK file, the Android application file that you upload to Google Play or to other Android app stores, you need to have a new version code. So that's used essentially as a unique indicator of the versions that you've uploaded. So if you upload an app and you're in testing mode and you find an error and you've got to upload it and load it again, the second time you do it, version code will be 2. Version name can still be displayed. It will be displayed as whatever you want it to be, but this needs to be a unique number. And Google Play and I believe the other app stores are the same. Will actually flag and sort of say this code has already been used. So that's really only an internal thing. So we've talked about the versions for the SDK API levels. And some of these other things here, like for example, string app name, the label and the theme and so forth, these relate to other files. So for example, if we look at app name, you can see that's used in a couple of places. Well, app name is defined in a string. So we can go back to that. Values, strings, app name. And we can see app name at the moment is set to top 10 downloader. So we could go back and change that to whatever we want. So this is a string resource that has been defined in strings.xml and that is being referenced. I'll just close this. That's being referenced in here, as you can see under the label. Another thing that can be referenced is the main activity. Now this is the main activity. This is the screen. As we do more screens, create more screens, we'll find that there's more things that will actually be coming up and being shown in here. .main activity, that's actually an abbreviation. We can do it 2 ways. We can either put the complete package in, like this, or we can just abbreviate it, just to put a dot and the main activity. And .main activity, I'm sure you remember that file, is this file, main activity. So if we wanted to change this, we could change them, literally rename it or create a new file with a different name, and we could change it in here, and it's telling Android which Java code do I need to execute first, essentially. So likewise for the themes, there's a reference to that as to what theme that the app is going to be running on. The icon, that equates to the files in the drawable folders. We can go and have a look at those. You can see here in the RES folder, resources folder, it's equating to the various icons, and depending on the scale of the device, those icons will be there. We've probably seen those before. It's just the Android icon in this case. So again, in the file here, this is referencing it and sort of saying, this is the name of the icon that you're going to use in this app, basically. Okay, you will find there's other things, and as we progress to more advanced apps, we're going to be using some more things in here. Like for example, when we add a second screen, there's going to be another activity. But essentially, if you think of the Android manifest XML file as a summary of the requirements that your app needs, that'll stand you in good stead. Or just a summary in general, not of just the things you need, because that's only one component of it. There's also the things like the version code and the minimum SDK version, API level, etc. That's in here as well, and things like the package name. But it's in the past, if you didn't have an IDE, an interactive development environment like Eclipse, you would have had to manually be updating this yourself. But of course, every time you make a change, Eclipse is doing this for you. So it'll only be on fairly rare occasions you'll need to go in here yourself. And just looking at some of these other things, so we're looking at the XML version. We can look at the graphical version in Eclipse, and that really does just that. It really gives you access to some extra things as well, but you've also got the ability to change these things. So we could quite easily change the package there, the version name there. Looking at the application, we've got a name. We've got all sorts of things, as you can see here. We can actually set and update depending on the particular app. And likewise for permissions. You can see we've got one in there. That was the Android Internet one. Like for example, we could add a standard user permission, and we could add Android.permission.camera. You can see that's now changed. And if we go back to our XML file, we've now got a user's permission. So that's really the major use there. And instrumentation, we probably won't be using that at this stage. So that's a bit of an overview. When in doubt, consult the Android manifest file, but you will find generally if you're using Eclipse, a lot of these things you won't need to be editing yourself manually here. It'll probably be the version, perhaps the SDK, but that's you normally do that when you create the app and don't change it. Or it's not something you can change very often. Probably permissions is something that you'll be changing more than anything, more than a lot of other things, because as you create your app, you might have started off with an app that didn't support the camera, for example, and then decided that you did want to support the camera. Okay, so I hope that gave you a good solid overview of the Android manifest file, a very important file, crucial to the running of an Android app, and I'll see you in the next video.